If you're enjoying this show, please remember to like and subscribe.
Yeah, that helps us out a lot.
Okay, so this time,
Uh-huh.
we're taking a look at the Congressional Record Daily Digests,
Okay.
covering Senate and House activities from January 21st to 25th, 2025.
Right.
Think of it as your quick update on what went down.
Sounds like a busy week.
Oh, it was.
Okay, I'm ready.
Right away, on January 21st, 2 new senators were sworn in.
Oh, okay.
Ashley Moody from Florida and John Husted from Ohio.
New senators can definitely shake things up, especially when votes are close.
Yeah, for sure.
Could be interesting to see how that plays out.
And speaking of close votes, the Senate filed a bunch of cloture motions.
A lot of those.
Yeah, just to remind our listener,
You're right.
a cloture motion is what ends debate and forces a vote.
Right.
And you need a supermajority, 60 votes.
Oh, wow.
So it's not always easy.
Definitely a strategic move, often used to get around filibusters or speed things up. Seeing those filed for important nominations sounds like there could be some serious political maneuvering going
It
on.
looks like they were trying to move forward with some pretty big nominations.
Right.
John Ratcliffe for CIA Director,
Okay.
Peter Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, Kristi Noem for Homeland Security,
Yeah.
Scott Bessent for Treasury Secretary,
Mhm.
and Sean Duffy for Transportation Secretary.
So those nominations could give us an idea of the administration's priorities, maybe even where they're headed with policy.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see what happens if they get confirmed.
Absolutely.
So what else? What else happened?
Well, one piece of legislation that stood out to me was the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act.
Oh, okay.
Both the Senate and the House considered this bill
Mm.
as S6 and HR 21, respectively.
Yeah, this is a really sensitive topic that often reflects, deeply held beliefs and ethical considerations.
For sure.
It's not surprising to see strong reactions on both sides.
Yeah, definitely. And we saw those reactions play out.
How so?
The Senate rejected a cloture motion on the motion to proceed with the bill.
Oh, wow. So that basically stalls it.
Pretty much.
That's a pretty big setback for the bill's supporters.
Right.
Seems like there's a lot of opposition in the Senate.
Yeah.
Probably won't go any further.
However, the House actually passed their version.
Really?
HR 21.
Huh. That's a huge difference between the two chambers.
It is.
Really shows you the divide on this issue.
Absolutely.
This could lead to even more political maneuvering, maybe even a showdown between the House and the Senate if they try to find some middle ground.
Yeah, potentially.
Okay, so what else was going on?
Shifting gears a bit to environmental and immigration matters.
Okay.
The House passed H.R. 471, the Fix Our Forests Act.
Okay, and what's that about?
It's aimed at streamlining forest management activities.
So, focusing on forest health, preventing those wildfires?
Exactly.
Yeah, those have become a major concern in recent years.
It wasn't all smooth sailing, though.
No?
There were some amendments, like the Perry Amendment,
Uh-huh.
which removed a focus on carbon sequestration from a biochar demonstration project,
Okay.
and the Carbajal Amendment,
Yeah.
which allows for the removal of hazardous trees near power lines to prevent wildfires.
Interesting. So those amendments really show how specific concerns and priorities can shape legislation,
Yeah.
even when there's agreement on the main goal.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then we have S5, the Laken Riley Act.
Right.
It originated in the Senate
Yeah.
and requires the detention of immigrants charged with theft.
Mm-hmm.
This one sailed through the House.
So that could be seen as a response to concerns about crime and immigration.
Yeah.
Might be part of a bigger trend toward stricter immigration policies.
It's possible.
What else happened this week?
In the middle of all this legislative action,
Right.
the Senate managed to confirm John Ratcliffe as CIA Director
Okay.
and Peter Hegseth as Secretary of Defense.
Those are big confirmations for the administration, filling those crucial national security roles.
For sure.
Could have big implications for intelligence and military strategy going forward.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
Hegseth's confirmation in particular was incredibly close.
Oh, how close.
It came down to the vice president's tie-breaking vote.
Wow, that close vote really shows how divided the Senate is.
Yeah, it does.
It could make things pretty difficult for Hegseth as defense secretary, especially if he wants to push through his agenda or make tough decisions.
Definitely adds another layer of complexity.
So what was going on behind the scenes?
Well, behind the scenes, Senate committees were busy looking at nominations for a bunch of other cabinet positions.
Oh, right.
Brooke Rollins for Agriculture Secretary,
Mm-hmm.
Eric Turner for Housing and Urban Development,
Right.
Douglas Burgum for Interior Secretary, Christopher Wright for Energy Secretary,
Okay.
and Lee Zeldin for EPA Administrator.
It seems like they're trying to fill a lot of these key positions.
Yeah.
Those committees are doing their due diligence, vetting those nominees, making sure they're ready for the job.
Right.
It's a big responsibility.
Over in the House, a number of committees had their organizational meetings, adopting rules, assigning subcommittee members,
Okay.
basically getting everything set up for the 119th Congress.
So setting the stage for their work, figuring out how they're going to handle legislation and what issues they're going to focus on.
Yeah, exactly.
Seems like a lot was going on, even beyond those big headlines.
Absolutely.
It definitely shows the importance of those committees.
It does.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Well, while we're on the topic of groundwork, the Senate started discussing H.R. 23.
Okay.
It's called the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act.
Okay, and what's that one all about?
This bill aims to impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court
Oh, wow. Okay.
if they target the U.S. or its allies.
So a pretty strong stance against international bodies that the U.S. sees as overstepping their boundaries.
Yeah, potentially causing some tension on the global stage.
Makes sense.
However, there seems to be some pushback.
Oh, really? How so?
A motion to close debate and proceed towards a vote on this bill was linked to the outcome of Sean Duffy's nomination for Transportation Secretary.
Interesting. So they're kind of connecting those two things.
It seems that way.
Nominations and legislation, they aren't always separate.
Right.
Lawmakers often use different issues to push their agendas.
And speaking of nominations, Scott Bessent's confirmation for Treasury Secretary also faced a cloture motion.
Okay.
All this happened on January 22nd.
So it seems like the Senate was trying to clear the way for votes on a few key nominations that week.
Yeah, looks like.
Maybe trying to fill those positions quickly.
Possibly.
All right, so let's circle back to the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act.
Okay.
Remember how the Senate rejected that cloture motion on January 22nd?
I do.
Big blow to the bill's chances.
It was.
It's interesting, though, that the Senate did try to find some common ground earlier on January 21st.
Yeah.
They agreed through a unanimous consent agreement to continue discussing it the next day and then have the cloture vote.
Right.
Those unanimous consent agreements are a way for the Senate to speed things up, keep things moving smoothly, even when they don't agree.
Makes sense.
So in this case, it let them have a more structured debate,
Yeah.
even though they had those underlying disagreements.
But it didn't change the outcome, unfortunately.
No, the cloture motion failed,
Right.
and the bill stalled.
Meanwhile, the House revisited H.R. 471, the Fix Our Forests Act, on January 23rd.
Oh, right. And how did that go?
Well, it passed,
Okay.
but with a few amendments, as we mentioned before.
Right. Those amendments are a good example of how complicated the legislative process can be.
Yeah.
Different perspective, different priorities,
Wow.
all that can lead to changes and compromises.
Exactly.
It all shapes the final version of a bill,
The House also passed S5.
the Laken Riley Act.
That's the one,
Okay.
on January 22nd,
Right.
after it made its way through the Senate.
So now it goes to the president's desk.
Yep.
This quick passage in both chambers shows that they agree on this immigration policy. But it also makes you wonder about what this means for immigration policy in the future.
Yeah, good point.
What about those confirmations? Any updates there?
Let's touch on those again.
Okay.
Peter Hegseth's confirmation as Defense Secretary on January 24th.
Right.
That was a moment.
It was a close one, right?
It all came down to the vice president's tie-breaking vote.
Those close calls really show you how important every vote is
For sure.
and how much power is concentrated in the Senate.
Absolutely.
The vice president's role in this case, it highlights the significance of that position,
For sure.
especially in a Senate that's so divided.
Definitely.
What about Ratcliffe? How did his confirmation go?
John Ratcliffe was confirmed as CIA director on January 23rd.
Okay.
And this one went much more smoothly.
Oh, good.
A significant majority voted in favor.
So it seems like there was more agreement on Ratcliffe.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Maybe intelligence positions are seen as less politically charged.
It's possible.
What about the committees? What were they up to?
Now, while all of this was unfolding,
Right.
the Senate committees continued their work, examining those nominations
Uh-huh.
for the cabinet positions we talked about.
Right. That behind-the-scenes work is so important. They really scrutinize those nominees,
They do.
assess their qualifications,
Mm-hmm.
make recommendations to the full Senate.
It's an important part of the confirmation process.
It is.
So on January 22nd, the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation,
Yeah.
they gave their approval to Sean Duffy for Transportation Secretary.
Okay, so that paves the way for a full Senate vote.
Exactly.
When a committee approves a nomination, it's usually a good sign that it'll pass the full Senate.
It usually is.
So it looks like Duffy has a good chance.
The Senate Budget Committee also finished a hearing on Russell Vought
Right.
for the role of Director of the Office of Management and Budget.
Okay, that's a key position.
Overseeing the president's budget proposal.
Exactly.
So that hearing probably gave some insight into Vaught's thinking on fiscal policy,
Right.
his vision for the federal budget.
And on January 23rd, the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, they wrapped up a hearing on Brooke Rollins for Agriculture Secretary.
Agriculture is a huge part of the economy.
Absolutely.
So this nomination is a big deal.
That hearing would focus on Rollins' experience and policies related to farming, food production,
Right.
rural communities.
It's a wide-ranging position.
It is.
Her confirmation could really change the direction of agricultural policy.
Okay, so while the Senate was busy with confirmations, the House committees were holding their organizational meetings.
Getting ready for the new Congress.
Exactly.
Those meetings are really important for getting them set up.
They are.
They figure out the structure of the committees, adopt rules, assign members to subcommittees.
It's all part of the process. It lays the groundwork for their work in the new session.
So the House Financial Services Committee, on January 22nd, they adopted their Rules and Oversight Plan.
Okay.
And they created a task force to tackle major economic challenges.
Sounds like they're taking a proactive approach.
It seems that way.
Okay. What about the other committees?
That same day, the House Foreign Affairs Committee also adopted their Rules and Oversight Plan.
Okay.
And finalized their staff list.
So they're ready to go.
It seems so.
Okay. What about the Budget Committee?
The House Budget Committee, they adopted their Rules and Oversight Plan on January 23rd.
Getting ready to tackle that federal budget?
That's a big one.
It is complex and often contentious.
Definitely.
All right, so what about the actual work of the committees? Any updates there?
Moving on to some specific committee work, the House Natural Resources Committee had a busy day on January 23rd.
What were they looking at?
They considered a bunch of bills concerning water, wildlife, and fisheries.
So focusing on the environment, managing resources.
Exactly.
That's a wide range of issues under their jurisdiction.
It is.
Okay, so what specific bills were they looking at?
One bill they discussed was H.R. 231.
Okay.
The Colorado River Basin System Conservation Extension Act of 2025.
Okay, that's an important one, considering how important the Colorado River is for water in the West.
Absolutely.
It's all about ensuring that water supply.
Yeah.
Especially with all the challenges they face.
For sure.
All right, what else?
They also tackled H.R. 261.
Okay.
The Undersea Cable Protection Act of 2025.
Interesting. So focusing on those undersea cables that are so important for communication.
Right.
All the data transmission.
Exactly.
It's a crucial part of our interconnected world.
And they also looked into H.R. 331.
What's that one about?
This bill aims to clarify a provision in the Aquifer Recharge Flexibility Act.
Okay, so they're really paying attention to how we manage groundwater, which is so important for communities and ecosystems. Makes sense. It's all about the details.
It is.
All right, what else was on their agenda?
The House Natural Resources Committee also discussed legislation related to the Water Smart Access for Tribes Act.
Interesting.
Ensuring that tribal communities have access to water resources.
Right. It's about fairness.
It is.
Making sure everyone has what they need.
Okay, moving on to the House Energy and Commerce Committee. They held a hearing on January 23rd.
Okay.
It was called Strengthening American Leadership in Wireless Technology.
Okay, so focusing on technology and how it impacts our lives.
Yeah, especially with all the advancements in wireless technology.
Right, it's everywhere these days.
It is.
So they're looking at how to keep the U.S. competitive in that area.
And on January 22nd,
yeah,
the same committee's Subcommittee on Environment.
Okay.
They looked at the legacy of a major environmental law.
Oh, interesting.
Holding a hearing titled, A Decade Later, Assessing the Legacy and Impact of the Frank R. Lautenberg Chemical Safety for the 21st Century Act.
That makes sense. It's been a while since that act passed.
It has.
It's good to check in, see how it's working, if anything needs to change.
Absolutely.
It's all about making sure those laws are still doing what they're supposed to.
Right.
Okay, what about transportation? Any news from that committee?
The House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee also had a busy week.
What were they focused on?
Improving America's infrastructure.
Infrastructure is crucial for the economy.
Yeah.
It's good to see them prioritizing it.
On January 23rd, their subcommittee on railroads, pipelines, and hazardous materials.
Okay.
They held a hearing titled, America Builds, examining America's freight and passenger rail network.
Rail transportation is so important
It is.
for moving goods and people across the country.
Exactly.
Investing in rail infrastructure can make a big difference.
Right, it can create jobs, make transportation more efficient.
Exactly.
So this hearing probably looked at how our rail networks are doing
Yeah.
and how to improve them.
Okay, what about the full committee? What were they up to?
On January 22nd, the full committee had a business meeting.
Okay.
They made some changes to their rules and approved their subcommittee rosters.
Right, all the organizational stuff.
They also held a hearing that day
Okay.
called America Builds, Highways to Move People and Freight.
Highways are the arteries of our transportation system.
Yeah.
Keeping them
Yeah.
safe and efficient is so important.
Absolutely.
All right, what else?
It seems like they were focused on addressing the needs of a modern economy
Right.
by investing in transportation infrastructure.
Makes sense. A strong transportation network is crucial for economic growth.
Now, the House Veterans Affairs Committee also had a significant week.
Okay, what were they working on?
They held hearings on important issues related to veterans' health care and rights.
Caring for veterans should be a top priority.
It should.
It's good to see that committee focused on their needs.
On January 23rd,
Yeah.
their subcommittee on disability assistance and memorial affairs
Okay.
held a hearing titled Correcting VA's Violations of Veterans' Due Process and Second Amendment Rights.
That's a sensitive topic
It is.
involving mental health, gun ownership,
Right.
due process for veterans who are receiving care.
It's a complex issue.
It is. It's about finding that balance,
Right.
making sure veterans get the care they need
Mm-hmm.
while also respecting their rights.
Exactly.
What about the full committee? What was their focus?
On January 22nd,
Okay.
the full committee held a hearing titled Restoring Focus, Putting Veterans First in Community Care.
Those community care programs are vital.
They are.
They give veterans more options for health care,
Mhm.
especially if they have trouble getting to VA facilities.
Exactly.
So this hearing was probably about making sure those programs are working well.
It seems like that was the focus.
Okay, what about the Judiciary Committee? What were they up to?
The House Judiciary Committee also had a busy week tackling some pretty contentious issues,
Oh, like what?
particularly related to immigration.
Immigration is always a hot topic.
It is.
A lot of different viewpoints, strong opinions on both sides.
On January 22nd,
Yeah?
their subcommittee on immigration, integrity, security, and enforcement
Uh-huh.
held a hearing called Restoring Immigration Enforcement in America.
Okay, so focusing on border security, making sure those immigration laws are enforced.
Yeah, sounds like it.
What about the full committee? Did they have any meetings?
The full committee also held an organizational meeting that same day.
Okay, so setting themselves up for the new Congress.
Right, getting all their procedures and assignments in order.
It's all part of the process.
Lastly, the House Homeland Security Committee held a hearing on January 22nd
Okay.
called Unconstrained Actors, Assessing Global Cyber Threats to the Homeland.
Cybersecurity is a major concern these days.
Liz,
The threats are constantly changing.
so this hearing was probably about how to deal with those evolving cyber threats.
Yeah, figuring out how to protect our critical infrastructure, keep our data safe.
They also had their organizational meeting that day.
So they're ready to start working.
It seems
It's been a busy week for those committees,
it has.
covering a wide range of issues.
Yeah, from healthcare to immigration to national security.
It just shows you how much work goes on in Congress
It does.
and how much impact it has on our lives.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is, but that's why we're here.
That's right, breaking it all down.
So the House Energy and Commerce Committee, they had that hearing on strengthening American leadership in wireless technology,
Right, on January 23rd.
keeping a competitive edge in a sector that's constantly evolving.
Yeah, wireless technology is changing so fast.
It impacts everything.
It really does.
Communication, economic growth.
It's a big deal.
And then on January 22nd,
Mm-hmm.
the Subcommittee on Environment,
Mhm.
under that same committee,
Okay.
they look at the long-term effects of the Frank R. Lautenberg Chemical Safety for the 21st Century Act.
That's a mouthful.
It is.
So they're checking in on that law.
Yeah, a decade later, seeing how it's working out.
It makes sense to revisit these things.
It does.
See if they need any tweaks.
The House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee,
Yeah.
they were busy with hearings on transportation systems and infrastructure.
Right, always important.
On January 23rd, they had a hearing titled America Builds, Examining America's Freight and Passenger Rail Network.
Focusing on rail infrastructure.
Exactly, looking at ways to modernize and improve it.
Rail transportation is so important for moving goods and people efficiently.
It is.
Could have a big impact on the economy.
And then on January 22nd,
Yeah.
the full committee had a business meeting.
Okay.
They made some changes to their rules and approved their subcommittee rosters.
All part of getting organized?
Right? And they also held a hearing that day.
What was that one about?
America builds highways to move people and freight.
Ah, highways, the backbone of our transportation system.
Keeping them safe and efficient is crucial.
Absolutely. It affects everyone.
Now, the House Veterans Affairs Committee,
Uh-huh.
they also had some important hearings.
Focused on veterans' health care and rights.
Right, taking care of our veterans is essential.
Couldn't agree more.
So on January 23rd,
Yeah.
the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs,
Okay.
they held a hearing titled
Mm-hmm.
Correcting VA's Violations of Veterans' Due Process and Second Amendment Rights.
That's a sensitive topic.
It is dealing with mental health, gun ownership, and due process for veterans receiving care.
Finding that balance between providing care and respecting rights.
Exactly. It's a complex issue.
And what about the full committee? What was their focus?
On January 22nd, they held a hearing titled Restoring Focus, Putting Veterans First in Community Care.
Right. Those community care programs are so important. Giving veterans more options for health care.
Especially if they have trouble accessing traditional VA facilities.
Exactly. Making sure those programs are working well is crucial.
The House Judiciary Committee,
Yeah.
they tackled several issues.
What were they focused on?
Immigration enforcement was a big one.
Always a hot topic.
On January 22nd, their Subcommittee on Immigration, Integrity, Security, and Enforcement.
Nope.
They held a hearing called Restoring Immigration Enforcement in America.
Focusing on border security, interior enforcement.
Making sure those immigration laws are enforced.
Right. And the full Judiciary Committee had their organizational meeting that same day.
Getting everything set up for the new session.
Makes sense.
And finally, the House Homeland Security Committee.
Uh-huh.
They had their hearing on unconstrained actors, assessing global cyber threats to the homeland on January 22nd.
Cybersecurity is a major concern.
It is. Those threats are always changing.
So they're looking at ways to mitigate those risks.
Exactly. And they also had their organizational meeting that day.
So they're all set up and ready to go.
It seems that way.
It's been a really busy week in Congress, huh?
It has a lot to cover.
From forest management to veterans care, cybersecurity, immigration, all those big issues.
It's been a whirlwind of activity.
It has, but hopefully our listeners now have a better grasp of what happened.
That's the goal.
Understanding the key events, the issues at stake.
Yeah, how it all affects us.
Exactly. Because staying informed is the first step towards making a difference.
Couldn't agree more.
So until next time.
Stay engaged and keep those comments coming.